Bet with your friends on WynnBET Sportsbook today using promo code BlueWire to get up to $1,000 toward a risk-free sports bet. Sign up now at WYNNBet.com. Offer subject to change, terms and conditions at WynnBET.com. Must be 21 or older and present in the state where playthrough WynnBET is available. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call 1-800-522-4700.
What is crack-a-lacking, Hardwood Knocks listeners? I am Dan Valley coming at you once more without my fantabulous co-host, Adam Frommel. Our team look-ahead train continues to roll on. We're up to the Minnesota Timberwolves. I brought back on Derek James. Follow him on Twitter at Derek James NBA. He is still a fantastic basketball mind. He used to cover the NBA and the WNBA media at various places, including, since we are talking about the Timberwolves, Canis Hoopus. So I just want to reiterate, follow him on Twitter. Still a great follow. Does still follow the Timberwolves very closely at Derek James NBA, spelled exactly as it sounds. Shout out to anyone who is listening to this on the night that it is dropped, which is Thursday night of this week, because it's the second podcast we're dropping in a day, because there are just certain teams that I have a backlog of these, but there are certain teams that are just wild cards and they terrify me that they're going to do something, whether it's trade for Ben Simmons or just something. I don't want them to date these in-depth look-aheads too quickly. So shout out to you if you're listening to this on Thursday, because it means that maybe you've downloaded 2 podcasts from us in the same day. That just makes you an OG or something. I don't know what that, it makes you very loyal and we appreciate it. That being said, please continue rating, reviewing, and subscribing to Hardwood Knocks wherever you get your podcast. Subscribing and downloading every episode helps us out a ton. Also, regardless of whether you use iTunes, we ask that you head over to it. If you have access to iTunes, search Hardwood Knocks, throw us that 5-star rating and write a review. It literally takes under 15, 30 seconds, whatever. The written reviews help a ton, and the ratings really help move us up in the charts. If this is your first time listening to us because you are a diehard Timberwolves fan, a devout follower of content that Derek puts out, or you're just here on accident, consider throwing us that permanent subscription. We cover the NBA at large. We are pleasantly sub-mediocre / modestly insufferable around these parts. Follow us on Twitter at Hardwood Knocks. You can also follow us on YouTube, youtube.com, search Hardwood Knocks. We will pop up. And we're on Instagram at Hardwood_Knocks. With all of that business out of the way, let's get into the Minnesota Timberwolves with Derek James. Derek, thank you so much for coming back to the Hardwood Knocks podcast to help educate me on some Minnesota Timberwolves stuff as usual. Before we get started, the most important question of the podcast, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. How are you doing?
I am spectacular over here. Sort of kind of wishing the offseason was like a week or 10 days longer. I'll probably be bemoaning it's too long next year, but no real life complaints over here.
Yeah, someone pointed out that, like when after the anniversary of Jimmy Butler's big finals game in 2020, that we had basically completed 2 seasons in less than a full calendar year. So I definitely share that sense that like, wow, this offseason's already over.
It's been a whirlwind, and I'm really just hoping that in their effort to get back to normal schedule-wise, I hope there's just not like an influx of injuries or something. I know like the science is still trying to bear whether that had any impact like over this past year because of how short the previous offseason was, but just back-to-back truncated off seasons, that worries me a little bit, or I should say a lot. Actually,
even if teams aren't, injured, I think I feel like they just still took a toll on, even like the Celtics, even though they had, major COVID problems. They were probably behind the Wizards and the Grizzlies, the team that struggled the most. And I don't think any of the conference finalists made it back to even the conference finals. So I think it really did knock everyone out who went deep, and I'll be curious to see how that plays out this year. I mean, especially with, like a team like the Bucks and the Suns, it's like, there's no reason they can't go back to, at least the conference finals,
right?
Unless this crazy schedule catches up to them.
Well, the Timberwolves have had a little bit longer of a break than those teams.
And they will still not probably go to the conference finals.
That's also a fair point. The place to start is just, apparently they just can't have like a non-dramatic offseason or something, but the whole like Gerson Rosas situation, is that like something that actually impacts this organization materially moving forward? Is it purely an optics thing? Like, is it something that, it's the whole situation is just like so bizarre.
Yeah, that was something that really came out of left field for some of us, I guess, who aren't as plugged in as others. Heard that in the way that a lot of, like some former employees were like, yeah, sounds right. Like that it was an uncomfortable work environment and things like that. And, I think as far as effect on the team, I mean, and everyone else in the workplace, I mean, that's really hard to say day to day, but I think the biggest risk, could be, someone like Karl-Anthony Towns, who's like, I think even voiced his displeasure, with, more turnover. I don't think he had an issue with the reasoning why, I wouldn't guess, but he's like, there hasn't been a lot of stability and consistency here. And it's really hard to build anything when you have that upheaval constantly.
Yeah, and the optics obviously aren't great. I think this the situation where he was the one that tweeted like WTF when it all went down. That's like never a great sign when like one of the 15 best players in basketball like is caught that off guard by your instability.
Well, and I don't think we knew very much at the time what was going on at that point. And I mean, it just looked like they had just fired their general manager right before training camp. And it's like, well, why would you do this then? And then you're like, okay, well, inappropriate workplace relationship and toxic work environment. And it's like, okay, well, that is, a decision that you've had to, you have to make. And, it's just really unfortunate with his team that, I don't think there's any way to know this, even though Gerson Rosas had that weird, like, I don't even think he made it 6 days as the Dallas GM at one point, that weird little stint he had before he was pushed out again. And then, there's just this and all the, the rumblings that we heard underneath. And, I don't think there's any way to, suss something like this out in advance. I don't think, Glenn Taylor could have known anything, even if, hey, Glenn, for one reason or another, you always wind up picking the wrong person. It's just, you just hope that this hasn't really strained that relationship with Karl-Anthony Towns, because I think that has a trickle down effect on the rest of the organization. I mean, I was in that locker room in 2014, Kevin Love's last year in Minnesota, and his, discontent really just seemed to just cast a cloud over that entire room. It was not a good place to be in. It doesn't seem like Cat is in that place. He seems like he's still in a more positive place than, Love was, and that, this is probably just another thing that the organization has to work through. But I guess on the bright side, it is a sign of a healthy organization that, they remove the people, who are creating this situation like that in general. So this isn't just, A-Rod and Mark Lord just deciding that they want to, turn over the front office right before the start of the season. That would be truly chaotic. I think this is just, really unfortunate timing, and hopefully they've contained the collateral damage.
Yeah, and I didn't even think about the Gerson Rosas and just a short stint in Dallas, but I guess I'd probably argue that if he had a toxic workplace environment and an extramarital affair there, he'd have gotten a couple of promotions based on what's happened in Dallas in the past. So I am obligated.
Yeah, that's the place.
I am obligated to ask sort of it's a basketball question, but it's like not immediately on the court because this player is not on the Timberwolves. The Minnesota's been at the forefront of the Ben Simmons rumor mill. I think the latest report is that they're still sort of there, but Gupta just isn't like as, hot after Ben Simmons as Rosas was. My twofold question on this is, one, do you like the conceptual fit of Ben Simmons in Minnesota? And two, like what type of package, or what's the best package that you would realistically be willing to give up for him? And I've been asking these questions to the teams that have been linked to Simmons the most, because like the packages out there just get so wide. Like you have what Daryl Morey wants, and then you have like the reply people on Twitter who want to give up an expiring contract in 2 seconds because they think that Ben Simmons is crap now.
Yeah, I definitely think we've gone too far the other way on Ben Simmons. Change of scenery could do him good. A good sports therapist could probably do him good too, all the same, and just stay in Philadelphia. Now, is that the best environment with, Doc Rivers, who has thrown his players under the bus, on and off the record in the past? Joel Embiid, who says everything that comes to mind. Like, I mean, I don't know that that's the place for a guy who's dealing with some fragility issues and struggling with his game. But there's no doubt that, let's not lose sight of this. This is the Minnesota Timberwolves. This team has had one winning season since 2004. I mean, if you can add an all-star, a perennial all-defense guy, defensive player of the year candidate, that's something, you do have to look at that. I mean, especially if you think that you can get him. I think what's tough with the Timberwolves is that they just, Gerson Rosas was so, he took a lot of chances with their first round draft picks, and like the D'Angelo Russell, Andrew Wiggins trade. I guess we'll see how much that, how that looks in hindsight. Generally, I think giving up first round picks is a bad idea. I think, like the most damaging one was the first round pick for Adrian Payne that Flip Saunders gave up years ago. So I think you really have to, so if they get into a situation where, they owe all these picks down the road and all these pick swaps, in general with that can be very harmful to a team that's looking to build. I think it'd be very certain in someone like Anthony Edwards, assuming you're keeping him, just like the question of, what are you giving up to get him? I know like Wolves fans, of course, like, I could probably do Jaden McDaniels. Like you definitely do Jaden McDaniels in that situation. Don't be ridiculous. Like he's a nice prospect, but like he's not like off the table good. I would definitely go as far as DM. I think apparently Gerson Rosas wanted to keep Russell Edwards and Simmons, but I don't know what are you doing then? McDaniels and Beasley and some picks. Like I wouldn't do that either if I was Philly. So, I mean, it just in general, it just seems like everyone's kind of cooled on him and no one wants to pay what Morey's asking. As these teams, got into camp and start to build some continuity, that would be a major upheaval. And I think you would have to know, like, what are you going to do with this? If you do, you uproot your team for what? So I think you got to know, like, when this comes together, what's it going to look like? I mean, if you're the Nets and you trade for James Harden, you're like, well, eventually we're going to be a championship contender this year once that all settles down. And they would have been. I mean, I think that was right up. That was a great gamble to take. If you're the Timberwolves, you kind of got to look big picture here. And, you do have Ben Simmons under contract for 3-4 more years after that. I mean, that's, if you're giving up something there, at least, you're going to be able to keep the guy for a little bit. But then do the Sixers, do they want, Malik Beasley can help the team now. Jaden McDaniels is a prospect, so what does that leave them with, Maxey and Tybal, as the young guys around him and Tobias Harris, like that's, it's hard to say that's a title contender. And, it definitely knocks them a step back if they do that. So I get why Morey is asking so much for Simmons, especially given where it's.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I didn't realize you weren't finished. All you.
Oh, no. I was just saying, like, I get why he's asking so much. But from the Timberwolves, I think it makes sense that Edwards and Towns are off limits. I do think there's a lot with Anthony Edwards. Even if, he definitely looked very lost at some points on defense last year, but offensive, I really like the way that he finished the season.
Yeah, I would agree that, Talon should 100% be out. Don't give up the best player in the trade for Ben Simmons. Like, that's just a terrible idea. And I would agree that Anthony Edwards should be off the table. I've seen, parts of Wolves Twitter just, not wanting to give up D'Lo, and that's, in a vacuum, that's ridiculous. But then, to me, it's, the element of him being friends with Towns. I don't know how that impacts it.
That's the political part of that to me. Like, you have to go to Towns and be like, hey, I know that all three of you are buddies, but we can't do this without giving up Russell. And that's the unfortunate part there.
What you made a really good point about, too, is there's a big difference between having done this a month or 6 weeks ago and now when you're through training camp, the season starting. And it would be nice to also go through a season where, you had the Chris Finch change in to hiring Chris Finch in the middle of last year, which was something else that didn't generate for the Timberwolves. And this is all what makes this a complicated case is that I think you need a third team here because Beasley, McDaniels, those are guys that can help the Sixers immediately. I can't imagine they would be super high on Russell moving forward. And so if you're going to use picks and other salary as the meat and potatoes of the deal, plus Beasley and McDaniels, there needs to be that third team that is willing to, and look, historically, this wouldn't be the dumbest move, but hedge against Minnesota's future and take on their draft picks. Maybe that third team arises as the season goes on. I feel like I would give it a sub 10% chance that Simmons ends up in Minnesota, but I think Minnesota's the team that I would be most interested, just looking at the basketball fit, him and Towns and Anthony Edwards. That's the team that I would love to see him on the most.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's a very cool team. I mean, all the ball handling that you would still have on that team, you would have a guy who could defend next to Ant and with Cat. I think it's funny when you mentioned a team, that, would maybe hedge against Minnesota's future. I mean, this just sounds like Sam Presti and just, asking for that extra pick and then shuffling some other assets to Philadelphia.
I'm sure Philly would love Shea. I think people in Oklahoma City would riot if they traded Shea Gilgeous-Alexander.
It would be over for that.
Shopify is the all-in-one commerce platform to start, run, and grow your business. Shopify gives entrepreneurs the resources that were once reserved for big business. So upstarts, startups, and established businesses alike can sell everywhere, synchronize online and in-person sales, and effortlessly stay informed. Scaling your business is a journey of endless possibility. Believe me, my fishing company that I started 5 years ago with my best friend Aaron, called Woo Tungsten. Actually, it's pronounced Woo Tungsten, because that's the sound you make when you catch a giant fish. Woo! We started this company 5 years ago, November of 2016, and we've been on Shopify since day one. We sell tungsten fishing weights, and our business would be nowhere close to where it is today if it wasn't for Shopify making things so incredibly easy. And like mine, Shopify powers over 1.7 million businesses from first sale to full scale. You can reach customers online and across social networks with an ever-growing suite of channel integrations and apps, including Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and more. You can gain insights as you grow, and they have detailed reporting of conversion rates, profit margins, and beyond. More than a store, Shopify grows with you. This is Possibility, powered by Shopify. Go to shopify.com/Blue Wire. That's all lowercase for a free 14-day trial and get full access to Shopify's entire suite of features. Grow your business with Shopify today. Go to shopify.com/Blue Wire right now. That's shopify.com/BLUEWIRE. Shopify.com/Blue Wire.
When it comes to hiring, there is no shame in needing an assist to score. Indeed has helped businesses stay competitive with their hiring, and they can do it for you too. Get started right now with $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Indeed is a hiring partner that gets you what you really want, a short list of quality candidates as fast as possible, because you can do it all. Attract, interview, and hire all at Indeed. Get a $75 credit. You heard me. At Indeed.com/Blue Wire. One of the things I love about Indeed is that it makes hiring all in one place so easy. Whenever I was looking for a job, Indeed was the very first place I go. Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Offer valid through December 31st. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
People who are actually employed by the Timberwolves, though, include Chris Finch. And he was there. I think he ended up being there when I was going through the data. He was there for more than half the year last season, or at least Saunders was gone for more than half the season. I think that timeline was pretty quickly rebounded. Did you have any takeaways from any changes in how the team is going to play under him?
I felt like there was more structure with Chris Finch. I think that was the biggest thing there. I think I noticed it especially with Anthony Edwards and D'Angelo Russell. I think before that, before I started watching D'Angelo Russell every day, I was like, oh yeah, I don't mind him. He's a guy, who's never afraid of the big shot and everything like that. But he actually can be a wildly frustrating player at his worst. But I thought that his shot selection actually looked like it was more refined under Chris Finch. And it looked like he's playing more of a all-around game. I think especially than we're used to with Russell. And I believe with Edwards, there was a significant drop-off in his threes per game from Saunders to Finch. And I thought that was really important there. It's like, with this, Anthony Edwards can get to the line very well for a kid, right? Especially a guy who has not had much coaching in the past, has not played a ton of basketball in his life. And he still has just all that potential. And you don't want to be too restrictive with guys, but I think, that especially for young players still learning like that, I think that structure and discipline can be good. And that, discouraging them from just pulling up and shooting the ball, just because they can, and, try to get it inside and get to the line. I think seeing that stuff more and more from Anthony Edwards, and I think some of the stuff that we've seen from camp on defense has even been encouraging, although even in preseason. But, that's always training camp and preseason, and, hope is alive right now. You have to kind of see how that plays out on the court. But I think it's encouraging what we saw. I think especially, the way that they finished the season. I think, I feel strongly about the way that they finished with, I think they finished like almost 500 over the last 25 games of the season, which is not a nothing sample of even an 82 game season. So I think when they have that long stretch of strong 500 play, I think that's really encouraging and something to be optimistic about, and again, preseason now, but they start off 3-4-0, they go into Brooklyn tonight. I think that's going to be a good test, because the first 3 quarters of these games, it's been mostly NBA rosters. I know the Clippers didn't play Paul George, and Zion's been out for the Pelicans game too. But Patrick Beverley didn't play the other night. He got a rest night, and they still stomped the Clippers. So it's it's good to see them going out and taking care of business against the teams that they should. And I think looking at every opportunity, I think as a building experience, it sounds kind of cliche. But for a team that has not done a lot of winning, there's been a lot of losing and disappointment. I think that they need to go out and build these habits. And, if you can show up in preseason, it's going to be a good practice for, the middle of February in Detroit when, you don't feel like getting up for it.
I think if we can measure their commitment by Patrick Beverley being so invested in the outcome of a preseason game that he tattletaled on Bones Highland, I think that was that preseason game number 1 or 2, whatever it was. This team is going to be heavily invested in maybe every game. Their defense was bad last year, and there's an element of, can it really get any worse if nothing changes because it was that bad? But
right.
Is there enough low-hanging fruit when you're looking at some of the stuff that they did wrong being, I think some of the stuff that stood out most glaring is if you watch pretty much any Minnesota Timberwolves game, there's just all these possessions where they seem completely disinterested in getting back on transition defense. But just even whether it's fouling less, is there just enough low-hanging fruit for them to address to be measurably better on that end? Or should we still expect maybe not bottom 4, but bottom 10 defensive team here?
Yeah, I think bottom 10 would be a good realistic goal. I know, if you're, as Anthony Edwards especially, I think, using him as kind of the barometer for how this goes, because his role just grew so much. He wasn't starting at the beginning of the year, and by the end of the season, he was playing good minutes. And I think you have a guy who's clearly never played NBA defense. He would get the spots and he wouldn't know where he's going. I would remember times when Jared Vanderbilt was pointing to the spot he needed to be in. He had no idea how to play NBA defense. And so you have a guy like that has such a big knowledge gap. That defense is really going to suffer. And it seems like he does put in the work. I know that I don't watch basketball quote was controversial, but it sounds like, he really does put in the film study. So why am I just going to watch it for fun when it's my job? But I feel like he's probably put in the work to study, his weaknesses and learn the schemes and where he needs to be. And I think, hopefully that has a greater effect when guys don't have to worry about compensating for his mistakes. Because I think we see a lot in basketball, and this isn't just Anthony Edwards. This can be D'Angelo Russell, Karl-Anthony Towns, any of the guys. When you have these breaks in the chain and, guys aren't able to, someone isn't where they should be, well, that forces someone else to have to cover that. And then that leaves another gap. And you just can't have these errors and these lapses again and again. And I think so, to be more disciplined on that end and, gaining experience together. Because, like we mentioned, the turnover of the Timberwolves, that's especially been true on the roster. Guys need to play together to learn each other's tendencies and, learn the system. And now this is another coach. And, I think, having a training camp with all these guys finally for the first time since the 1920 season, that's huge.
Wow. When you just put it like that just sounds so ridiculous, because it is ridiculous.
Yeah. And it was a pretty new roster last season too, I think.
Looking at the Edwards, what are realistic expectations for him in year 2? Is there anything? Look, and I think on defense, just as someone who clearly did not watch as much Timberwolves basketball as you, when you look later in the season, it did feel like there were games there was a little bit less ball watching, a little bit left of like guys getting behind him or him just leaving people completely unattended in the corner or something. And just, I don't want to place too much stock, but like the ferocity with which the reports or quotes out of training camp were just like, he looks so good on defense. And then factoring in just the vibes of this guy. You mentioned, we probably talked about the quote, I think one of the 2 times ago when you were on this podcast that you had about not watching basketball. He is like first team all vibes in the NBA right now because of what he says in interviews. So I'm just going to assume that he gets a lot better on defense, especially just being his second year. He was so good after the All-Star break. He hit almost 39% of his off-the-dribble threes. You did mention that maybe he was more selective in the ones that he was taking, which could help. But like, is there just anything specific you're looking for him to, or an area of his game where you could see like the biggest leap really coming aside from just that defense? Because that's another instance of, how much worse could he actually get?
Yeah, right. So I think, one thing I noticed, like, especially like the defense so far in preseason and just like backing up what they've seen, I believe that, it looks good. Because, what game was it? It might've been the start of the Pelicans game where he blocks the pass from his own man and takes it back the other way. And then, he has a chase down block and maybe the same game too, so it's nice to see that, attentiveness, not gambling and being patient, but then also not giving up on plays. I think that's huge, just because, you're behind the play doesn't mean that you can't catch up. I think that, a lot of time that effort can go, could take him pretty far. But I think, I think what I want to see from him is just being more of a facilitator. I mean, I think up to this point, he's looking at the guy and watching him play, it's like, if you were playing against teenagers, a couple of years ago, actually he was in high school 2 years ago, I think. 3 years ago, which really isn't that long ago. And I mean, this guy, he's looked like an adult, I'm guessing, most of his life. And so he's probably able to just coast by on his physical gifts and be the guy. But I think seeing him embrace more of, being the more of a facilitator there, less of a ball stopper at times. Although I think good things happen when the ball's in his hands. But I think, looking out, like, is there a play for somebody else in this team? Because you're surrounded by Karl-Anthony Towns, D'Angelo Russell, Michael Beasley, or Malik Beasley, not Michael Beasley.
Oh, God.
You have all these opportunities. It's a throwback. But yeah, he doesn't have to be that guy. He doesn't need to take that upon himself anymore. So I think that, there should be, looking at being more of a facilitator and making those extra passes sometimes, I think it'd also benefit him a lot.
Do you think it's they're going to put the ball in his hands, and that's been pretty clear. Do you think that sort of impacts how much he's going to play with D'Angelo Russell outside the starting unit, or even how they use D'Angelo Russell a little bit? Because Edwards was already second on the team in pick and rolls ran per game, and I could even see a scenario where this season that he just leads the team in that category. So I'm just curious as to how his development could actually impact how this team views or uses D'Angelo Russell.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing with Ant, right? Like, I mean, he started the season, I think the expectations were low for him. It was like, yeah, he's a very, he's an intriguing prospect, very high upside, but, he doesn't have a camp. He didn't get a summer league, any of this. So they really brought him along slowly. They didn't put him in the starting lineup until he was too good to ignore. And I think, it could be the same thing, with Russell, and who's the lead ball handler there is, is this guy just too good to ignore at this point? And, do you want to put it into his hands more and more? I think that's a potential scenario that we could see happening. But I think no matter where he goes in this league, I think we see over and over again these last few years, the teams really want multiple ball handlers on the floor at the same time. So I don't know if there's necessarily going to be designation of, who gets what, but I think, getting him used to playing with another ball handler is just NBA life at this point, whether he was in the Timberwolves or, somewhere else, having to play with another ball handling guard, if you're going to be a starter and play the type of role he is, you're going to have to get used to that. So I think that will definitely be something to watch, especially since this team has so many guards. I mean, like Leandro Balmaro coming over, and then there's, Malik Beasley, there's, the Jordan McLaughlin's, Jalen Noel's, like they have a lot of guards and a lot of, guys to try to get minutes for. So I think it's be really interesting to watch, just how that rotation shakes out in general and how he fits in with that.
And I think if he's shooting the way that he did post All-Star break, Anthony Edwards, and you have just D'Angelo Russell, like those are two guys who can hit really difficult shots off the dribble, and Russell's still good at running pick and roll. I'm curious, like Russell was still fine, like 19 points, 6 assists, hits almost 39% of his threes. It still felt like an uneven year from him, and he was dealing with some like injury stuff. Is there like a better version of D'Angelo Russell than for this team, or is that probably about like what we should expect from him on a year-to-year basis at this point?
Yeah, I kind of expect to see more of the Russell that we saw at the end of last season versus the one that we saw at the start of the season. That was, just kind of did his own thing. He hit those, hits those big tough shots sometimes, and it's like, well, and it's a lot of fun. But I think when you look at it, like, well, was that really the best basketball play? Was there, a better shot somewhere else? Even if it wasn't him, that type of decision making. I think we saw, a lot less of those shots. I think, it's like reminds me of like when Ricky Rubio came over and, for the first couple of years, he slung some really fun passes. But then, sometimes it's like, you don't need to make the flashy pass. Sometimes, the simple pass is perfect. And I think that sometimes it can be the same thing, with shot selection. Sometimes it's the easy shot. That's the best one there. Whether it's you or someone else, not every shot needs to be a contested 27-footer.
Karl-Anthony Towns, everyone has been through hell over the past year and a half plus. No one more so than him. I don't even want to list off the stuff because it's just so unfortunate and tragic. Just going through the death of his mom, all his family members, having COVID himself, losing, he said he lost like 50 pounds or something, which is just like.
And he's not like he doesn't have a lot of fat mass to give.
No, I mean, when you watch it, like, no, like he didn't have 50 pounds to lose. Like this wasn't Zion. So, what I feel like, and I'm reticent to say this about stars, even though I did just recently record a Nuggets podcast where I said about Jokic, in part because maybe he's only played in 85 games over the past 2 years for just a variety of different reasons, all of which really were beyond his control. Have people forgotten like just how good this dude is? Like the discourse around his like actual whatever Twitter was angry about, like for a few days, 1 week, I was just seeing like the stuff about annoy where Anthony Towns like ended up in some of like the NBA rankings. And I was just like, I don't know how he would even get better on the offensive end. Like that's how good this guy is.
No, I mean, I think aside from Nikola Jokic, I mean, he is the most efficient big man in the NBA. It does feel like it's been a long time since we've seen him. He was all NBA in 2018 and, 2019 was a disaster, with the Jimmy Butler departure. And then, he's injured in 2020. And then, like everything we mentioned since then, like it's been a long few years. I think it's been a very trying few years for him too. And, when he's played, he's been great. He came out at the start of the 19-20 season, just guns blazing, 30 points, 14 rebounds a game over the first few. And it was, it really looked like, we were going to see, the best version of Karl-Anthony Towns yet. And then, the suspension after the scuffle with Embiid, and then he gets hurt, and then the season shuts down. And it really just felt like one thing after another. And I don't know. I mean, it really felt like, his disposition with the team was like really just souring. And I think so just the way that, he's handled everything since then, I think the team has allowed him space to process everything, which I think you have to do. We didn't see him for months. I think it's about 7 months since we had heard from him, after the wrist injury to, losing his mom and then, other family members too. And I mean, he was just, I think what's really admirable about the guy is, and this is not basketball necessarily, but just, I think just how much more mature that he presents himself. And I feel like he's really, because he's always, given the safe quote, the sanitized quote. Now I feel like we really just get, the authentic Karl-Anthony Towns. And it's been, great to see him come out the other side of that, at least from what we can see, as an incredibly strong person. And so I'm curious to see, now hopefully we can get a full season of him, staying healthy on the court and, reminding people just how great he can be because he's an incredibly special player when he's on. And I know people always, bring up, but the defense, it's like he can do just about anything else on the basketball court. He's not a perfect player, but he's offensively, I mean, he can, score from inside and out. He can pass the ball. He can rebound. Like there aren't a whole lot of deficiencies with him. And, hopefully he gets to remind us, of that.
He is still somehow only 25. And I guess in part because over the past years, it feels like he's been through the ringer. And I'm with like the off-court stuff, just grieving in public like that. And even just some of the quotes that he gave, like just the candor is like having to go through that and do it so publicly. I can't even fathom that as someone who's just older than Karl-Anthony Towns, having to grieve so publicly and cope with that trauma.
I just leave me alone. Like if I had, if there was a major life event that I had, and even like my Facebook friends, were mass like commenting, like reaching out, I'd be like, guys, just let me breathe. And so just to be a public figure and to have to go through all this stuff, I mean, that has to be difficult too.
And that's why I cringe a little bit when people say, and I'm assuming the sentiments are like not this, but like, I don't want to politicize his grief where it's like, they should talk to Karl-Anthony Towns about the risks of COVID-19. It's like, it's not Karl-Anthony Towns' responsibility to educate everyone on which one, he shouldn't have to, but like that stuff makes me cringe. Point being just, and I don't remember the exact quote now, but when he just said like, basically that former self or version of himself is just gone. Like that just really like, that stuck with me.
That was the most sobering availability that I can remember covering the Timberwolves. I think that was last fall when it was the first time that he came back and spoke. And, he was just, that was very somber. And I think all of us came away from that just like, holy crap. Like this guy's really been through it. You could just see it on his face. It looked like he had, he definitely, carried himself differently than when we last saw him.
Is there any also the past 2 seasons, just his passing, just like some of the like the tosses he makes like off the dribble now, like it's like watching a point guard almost. Is there? I don't even want to say is there a better version of Karl-Anthony Towns like on off? I don't even know what that would look like. I guess I can't fathom it. Is he going to be used any differently like under a full season of Chris Finch, or it's I can't imagine necessarily improving it, but I guess with having D'Angelo Russell, having Anthony Edwards, even Malik Beasley factoring into there, just because when you look at like their top 5 players, they barely played together last year or over the past 2 years or however long it's been. I'm just curious if there's like any change in how he might be used on the offensive end.
By the way, the top 5 players barely played together last season is like the Timberwolves story. Feels like every season it's like, the top 5 guys, they only played 115 minutes together. Like funny how that always seems to happen to them. A better version though. I mean, you're right. It's tough. I mean, because like you said, like to your point about him slinging passes like a point guard, when he catches the ball at the top of the key and with a big man on him, that guy's getting taken off the dribble more times than not. And it's really just like watching a shooting guard go to work or another wing. I mean, and someone like in his game and talents, in Chris Fincher's imagination, I think that's going to be fun to see how that plays out. I can't pretend to know enough defensively about how they're going to use him. I know there was a lot of hand wringing about the drop coverage they had him in and whether that was the best fit for him. So I think wondering how, he's used defensively too, and seeing, how if there are ways that they can benefit him there, it would also go a long way. I think that's probably the better version is, just finding a way to not necessarily hide his defensive deficiencies, but play up any strengths that he has on that end while, covering up as many as he can.
Maybe it's not a spicy take, but if there was just like some semblance of consistent defensive talent in front of him, or like if they could just find the front court partner for him, that's just the front court partner for him, and it doesn't feel like it's this turnstile of options. I think if you're able to just streamline his defensive or narrow it down, that he probably doesn't look like as much of a liability. No,
and I mean, I think, like the obvious thing that, the quick thing that comes to the brain is like, find him a Draymond. Like, yeah, right. Like just go find a Draymond, like this unique prototypical player. But, it's the guy who can, just defend just about anybody. And I mean, I think, at times, Jaden McDaniels, he looked good against, those bigger guys, and, he's very much built like a teenager still. And Jared Vanderbilt, he can hold his own, but, at times, against bigger guys, you see the size disadvantage into play there. I'll be very curious to see who can grow into that and how they can sort of, I guess, manage those mismatches, like, like with Vanderbilt against, bigger guys, and how they can handle that. If you're curious, the lineup on this team that makes, and I think would constitute their top 5 guys, unless you're just very high on Patrick Beverley, Jaden McDaniels, and Edwards, Malik Beasley, Towns, and D'Angelo Russell.
those five didn't play a single second together last season. And if you just take out Jaden McDaniels from that, the other four per Clean the Glass played a whopping 27 possessions together last season.
Oh my gosh.
That is low. That's low, even by Timberwolves standards, I think.
Yeah, that is incredibly low by Timberwolves standards. And I wondered too if it's something where, like the Wizards a couple of years ago, where it's like, how is this team going to defend? And the answer was they're not. They're just going to, score the crap out of the ball.
I was already drunk on Jaden McDaniels before Summer League. After watching some of the stuff he was doing on the ball in Summer League, I'm still intoxicated. Definitely over the legal limit with it. What is there like more than a 3-and-D role for him though on this team? It feels like the constraints could be more organic because of all the talent that's around him. And I'm also just, what is the thinking, or unless I'm just off here, it does feel like they don't want him to necessarily be that 4 with how we see people are assuming Jared Vanderbilt will start next to Towns. We've seen Towns with Naz Reid in the preseason too. And I'm just curious what the logic is behind that.
Yeah, I don't think they know quite yet where they're going with that 4 spot. I mean, because like you mentioned, they started one game with McDaniels and Vanderbilt, and then they have also put Josh Okogie in there. I think we've seen Okogie, Beasley. I don't know who they're going to put in there tonight, but it could be someone completely different. Maybe they do go big against the Nets. But yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think at least McDaniels has been in the lineup. It's hard to tell sometimes too, like if that's, is he going to be primarily, a 3 or 4, and then they just kind of switch it up, depending on the matchup there. It seems like, he's too good not to play though. And I think maybe any sort of hesitancy in playing him at the 4 would be to kind of save him a little bit from going against more physical players. But then I don't really know how many physical 4s there are out there these days.
They're basically wings now,
Dennis
right?
Rodmans and yeah, exactly. I think that's kind of the thinking too with McDaniels. It's like he might not be a 4 long term. Maybe he's a 3. I don't know that the handle's there right now for him to create. I think someone pointed out to me too, like with like his body type and his game. It's almost, now this is not talent wise either, but just kind of Kevin Durant, like where he just has that high release point, same lanky frame. So I think physically it's kind of interesting to watch. Like what he does and where he winds up playing. Because, like he really needs to put on some size too, I think maybe before they bring him inside. That's the only thing I can think of. But, for a smaller guy, like he holds his own. I mean, he seems like he's pretty strong, even if, he may not look like the strongest guy in the floor.
And I normally wouldn't even get caught too much up in the positional designations for many of the reasons you just outlined. But like if you do play Reid and Towns in the front court, or if it's Vanderbilt and Towns in the front court, and then Jaden McDaniels, like there's very clearly a center and a power forward in that scenario. Then because like you're not having Vanderbilt guard Reid. And
no,
I feel like McDaniels might end up having an okay floor game. I got a little bit worried that like just when you watch him dribble, it looks like his knee might knock into the ball when it's coming like his way back up. I just don't know whether they have the bandwidth to sort of like explore the deeper parts of his game.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably something that's going to take a little time. And, like his catch and shoot game, I mean, that's looked good. That looked good almost all season last season. He's pretty reliable out there. Yeah, I think that handle, you're right, is definitely something. And I think one thing that could determine, where he plays as much as anything is what the guards do. Because like I mentioned, they have about 6 rotation-worthy guards. So that's going to be tough to find minutes for them. And then Jake Layman is still hiding on this team somewhere.
He's going to trick me into believing in him during the first 15 games or something of the season. I can feel it.
Oh no, that's a trap. I just can't wait for it's like with Ricky Rubio, and every time he goes to a new team, he's like, oh, he's made shots for 2 weeks now. And it's like, yeah, he does that every single season.
To be fair, there was like a season-long con when he was in Utah or whatever. He hit it was an astronomical for Ricky Rubio high percentage of his threes. And I think he swindled me a little bit into believing during that stretch too.
He finished 41%, 42% one season. It was like, oh, okay.
Have you seen, and the numbers were not good on this last year, but I'm willing to throw last year out the window. Do you like the idea of Naz Reid and Karl-Anthony Towns playing together? I like Naz Reid, and I think people probably don't understand how good Naz Reid is. And he stretches the floor too. I don't know if I love those two together though.
No, that's kind of a weird one. I feel like their skill sets in some ways kind of overlap in the things that they like to do. only Naz Reid is a little less athletic, I think, by NBA player standards. I mean, obviously by, normal human being standards, like he's incredibly athletic. But I think
just so aggregators are clear,
that's
Derek is not
one.
saying that he is more athletic than Naz Reid.
Yeah, that's never been a question. I think just, to Naz's credit, I don't think we talked about this, last year by this time. But, Reid, I think when he started out, it's like, are we sure this guy's ready for the NBA? He was just getting lobbed over, and it's like, dude, you're 6'11". How are they just throwing lobs over you? Like, that shouldn't just happen. And he really, you could see the work that he put in, and, just how much more comfortable he got as the season went on. So, maybe there is a way that, he adapts to playing next to Karl-Anthony Towns more in certain situations and experimenting with that lineup, maybe in spurts and when it makes sense.
So you kind of already mentioned how difficult the guard rotation is going to be. And when you look at, when I was trying to build a top 10 rotation for them, it does feel like they have 8 locks with Cat, Ant, D'Lo, Vanderbilt, McDaniels, Naz, Beasley, and Beverly. Would you agree that those are the 8 locks? And how would you finish if you had to pick 2 more players to sort of finish off that rotation with? Who are you rolling with?
Oh man, I forgot about Patrick Beverly. Yeah,
he's on this team.
Yeah, no, I like that too. Just like that chippiness is just something that they haven't had. There hasn't really been anyone on this team, almost ever, who just gets under guys' skin and can be that agitator.
Memphis Grizzlies legend Patrick Beverly.
Yeah. So they just brought over Vanderbilt Morrow, like I said, so I feel like they're going to want to see him. So I feel like that's the 9th. This roster is just still so imbalanced in that it skews backcourt so heavily that I think they're really going to have to experiment with Beasley and Edwards on the wing for sure. I don't see how they can just be like, oh no, yeah, you're strictly backcourt players for the
Mm-hmm.
And then they still like, okay, well, you have Jordan McLaughlin, Jalen Noel, probably one of those 2 guys for the last spot that I can think of without having a roster up in front of me.
Yeah, and look, Paul Morrow's also 6'6" himself. And so do you think he's actually going to get regular run as a rookie? And do you know anything? I know very little about what he's supposed to do.
Oh, Taurean Prince. Yeah, he's probably the other. Yeah, because he can play. I think he can play either forward position.
Yeah, he definitely can.
Yeah. So, yeah. Okay. So yeah, that would be my other one then.
Do you expect Lamar to get like actual test run with this team? And what do you like or know about his game?
I don't know a ton about his game. I know that, he's, I think he's a bigger guard that, really emulated Ricky Rubio growing up. I don't know that I noticed him, a ton in preseason yet. It might make sense to bring him along slowly, but, they invested, the capital in, drafting him and signing him long-term. So I would definitely expect them to try to find, some use for him as the season goes on. I wonder if we'll see the same patient approach that we saw with Anthony Edwards last year, and just bringing them along slowly. And I'll be really curious to see, what the lineups look like as they work their way through the season.
We have reached the cookie cutter quick hitter portion of the podcast, the questions that I ask every single person, regardless of the team that we're speaking about. What is the biggest weakness on this team, be it if it's a specific position or just like a player archetype?
Yeah, I think it's, I think it's a lot of what we talked about with in the McDaniels conversation and, where he fits in. Because that front court is just, it's so weird. I think, you have Towns, you have Reid, but who really steps into those other spots, in the forward positions, and who really to play, who plays best next to him, and is there a long-term solution there? Prince, maybe he's still young enough to be here, when the Wolves are good again, but maybe you need, see Jaden McDaniels take over, or even Jared Vanderbilt. Very long-term deal. He'd probably like to play his way into a longer-term deal going forward, I think. So that's one that I would, I think, point to as the biggest weakness. And, I think if you could shift depth from one part of the roster to another, I think it would be some of that backcourt depth to the front court.
The answer to the question can clearly change as the season actually unfolds and we have a real sample size to work with. But as of now, who would you peg as the player most likely to get traded from this team before the deadline?
Oh gosh, who is? I mean, I'm sure they would gladly trade, Jake Layman and rehome him, but with his small salary and his usage, like his value isn't very high. You're not really going to get much for him. Probably makes more sense in a bigger deal, involving some other guys. I like Malik Beasley. I definitely think he has a role on this team, but they also just traded for Patrick Beverly. They have D'Angelo Russell, Anthony Edwards, and all these other guys too. So I really wonder where he fits in long term. There was a lot of. I was really surprised by the reaction to when he signed his deal last offseason. Like, that's not bad money. Like, that's Jordan Clarkson-ish money. Like, it's pretty reasonable. So I wonder if there's a contender down the road who needs an extra an extra shooter. I think that would be interesting to see. And they have a lot of guys who are willing to take shots too. So who ends up being expendable there? I mean, even if who knows, maybe Beasley isn't expendable at that point, but I think he's probably the most interesting, realistic guy, because I don't think they would really entertain Jaden McDaniels unless they got something really good for him.
I think if you think that they're just going to be buyers, whether it's getting Ben Simmons, if Pascal Siakam becomes available or something, he would be the clear answer to me. I'm looking at this team as like, okay, I don't want to spoil like the over-under predictions, but like, I don't think they're going to be a playoff team. Patrick Beverly's on an expiring contract. Are you going to want to definitely re-sign him? It feels like he's the one that could get shipped to a contender, and he has sort of the mid-ish end salary at $14 million. And I'm with you on Malik Beasley's contract.
That's a good one.
Malik Beasley's contract too is like, with the cap going up and him not being super old, even if you're not sure where you're headed after this year, I might want to keep him. But I do think he is the player, regardless of if it's a buy now move. He is like the player that has to be in any permutation of a deal that you come up with. That's Malik Beasley.
And he only has 2 more years left after this season too. So, I mean, you can easily live with that.
I guess this question is probably less matchup dependent for a team like the Timberwolves. It feels like this answer could be set in stone, but what do you view, or what do you think should be their go-to crunch time lineup?
Oh gosh. I think, Russell, Towns, Edwards, and that's kind of where it gets tricky. Because I don't think you can have like a Josh Okogie out there. We haven't talked about Josh Okogie. I mean,
if he starts
in all of this,
if he starts playing better on offense, we can talk about Josh Okogie.
Yeah, man, there's just been nothing there, and I think this is what, year 4 or 5. He's year 4, I think now. Yeah, he's just done nothing on that.
He is like pure ungoverned rim pressure, at least, I guess. But like the end result of that isn't always good or watchable.
No, and he hit 1 3 in preseason, and they were like, and the broadcast, whichever broadcast it was just raving about what a shooter, and I'm like, he made 1 corner 3.
So I take it wasn't the Timberwolves broadcast then.
I don't think so. They're pretty realistic with that stuff. But I might go with the weird Beasley, Edwards, 2, 3, whatever you want to call them. And then I guess I think Jaden McDaniels probably brings a better balance with the offense and the defense for the last spot versus someone like Jared Vanderbilt, who he isn't the Josh Okogie of 4s, but he's not really an offensive player at this point in his career. So I think that makes a lot of sense. So McDaniels, Beasley, Edwards, Russell, and Towns would probably be mine.
Is there like a spot that's particular? I could also see them trying to I agree with the lineup that you picked. I'm wondering if they would they try and work Patrick Beverly in there a little bit before they would try and work in Jared Vanderbilt, who is plays like he has nitrous oxide coursing through his veins. Jared Vanderbilt is an acid trip to watch. It's fun. Oh
yeah. He's very smart too. Like I said, like I mentioned earlier about him, telling Anthony Edwards where to go, and just being wearing clearly understanding this stuff. Yeah, but anyway, yes, Patrick Beverly, I could totally see. I don't think it would be out of the question to have Russell, Beverly, Edwards, McDaniels, and then Towns. I mean, I think that's a realistic lineup that we could see at some point.
Is there a wonky, weird, offbeat, even a lineup that they would never try, but that you still want to see them try next season?
They have enough guards to do. They can do something weird with Beverly, Russell, Edwards, and Balmaro and Towns. Just
go four guards in
five
Towns.
out. Yeah, exactly. I don't know when you would ever want to do that. That's a weird one that pops to mind. I'm sure you could get really weird with the Naz Reid, Karl-Anthony Towns lineups too.
I don't like building a lineup without Karl-Anthony Towns in it, but if he's going to be on the bench, I would pay to see Patrick Beverly, Anthony Edwards, Malik Beasley, Taurean Prince, and then Jared Vanderbilt. That just feels like what could be a high octane, very undisciplined lineup that I would probably absolutely fall in love with. It could also end disastrously, but give me like Jared Vanderbilt plus 4 wings, and I feel like that team could fly. Look, if you want to put Karl-Anthony Towns in there plus the 4 wings, I'm totally good with that.
Just surround him with chaos engines.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Surround him with chaos engines. Their current win total over under as we record this is 35.5. Would you take the over under on that? And where do you let's assume they don't make this huge trade before the start of the season. Even though I can assure you I'll probably put this podcast up immediately because I'm terrified that, teams like the Timberwolves or Kings are going to date my conversations. But are you taking the over under on 35.5?
Yeah, that was the thing, this was a lot easier to answer. It was even harder when Rose was still there because, it's like, this is your second year with your full roster. This is your coach. I think, 40 wins would have been an expectation there. And I don't, maybe there's no reason to still, change that from the expectation, but, is that necessarily realistic? Because you put all this effort into building this team and, with what you gave up to get Russell and then, making the move to bring in Beverly, it seems like a team that, wants to win now. We know how well suited they are for that. I guess everyone can differ on that too. I feel like there's some opportunity there. I don't trust the Pelicans. I don't think, the Spurs.
Nor should you, by the way.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. That seems like the wheels could come off that at any moment. The Kings, you don't trust the Kings either. The Spurs, yeah, they're the Spurs, but, you look at that roster and they don't even have, DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge anymore. It's a lot, still a lot of unproven guys in new roles, or at least, unproven in those roles, in those bigger roles. I think they could get to the 10th seed, so I will say over, but not by much.
Where I run into an issue with this for them is I only view the Rockets and Thunder as the teams that I know are going to be worse than them. I feel like they're so entrenched in that Pelicans, Kings, Spurs territory right now.
Yes.
And maybe even you could throw the Grizzlies in there. I probably shouldn't just because they've burned me the past 2 seasons because I thought they were going to be bad. But they clearly just were we're not trying to win. They traded Jonas Valanciunas with their second best player last season.
Yes.
So you have that gaggle, and I guess I could talk myself into be okay, they'll be better than 2 of those other 4 teams. But just that combined with the fact that I've been a little bit generous with my over predictions as I'm looking at my document right now, I'm going to take the under. I don't feel great about it because if Anthony Edwards is better or as good as he was to close the season, if Towns stays healthy, that's just that 1-2 punch is so exciting and can do real damage over an entire season.
Yeah, and I can understand that. It's not, even just thinking through me saying over wasn't easy because I do think those questions about the defense and, how much of what we saw at the end of last season is real. Can Anthony Edwards, keep getting better and better? I think those are things that we can't answer now. And I think if we knew the answer to those, of course, this would be a much easier exercise. But yeah, I'm very curious to see, how they answer those questions. And, honestly, a 40-win season would be great. I think even just playing any sort of competitive basketball and getting that 10th seed for them, I think that would be a big boost for a fan base that has really just had very little to get excited about over the last few years.
I will say if they are the team that gets Ben Simmons and the end result, as I would expect it to be in that scenario, is you have Towns, you have Anthony Edwards, you have Ben Simmons, and I'm assuming they'd still have Patrick Beverly, even though if I were the Sixers, I might want Patrick Beverly in that deal. I think that core is 45 wins easy. That's how high I would be on the Timberwolves is if they make that trade, even if they're giving up 3 rotation players in Beasley, McDaniels, and Russell in the process.
Yeah, and I think depth is a tricky thing too, especially when you're looking at playoff teams. and that, like, because, like, oh, what about their depth and, this or that? I mean, as long as, there's no significant injury, which is always the case for everybody, teams are only playing, 8, 9 guys on the high end, in a playoff series anyway.
Yeah.
Those rotations sync up so much, so it matters so much less. And, I think there's still talent on this roster. I think that they could surround them with to even just get to 45. 45 now would seem like a dream scenario, like so much went right for them. With that kind of core though that you mentioned with Simmons in there, I think that would be much easier to see the path to 45 wins.
The final thing I was saying that too is when we were going through the rotation, I love their top 8 guys. Like those are all really good NBA players, and so that's why 35.5 at once seems low. I would need some assurances that the defense is not going to be like absolute ass. I think like that might be the
right,
because I don't think there's been a team I picked the under where I've loved the top 8 guys. And like this isn't like, oh, they really run out of options after guy 4. Like their top 8 guys are good NBA players, and 2 of them are probably great NBA players.
Yeah, and you're not talking yourself into, like Trevian Graham or something as like the 7th guy, or
I've been there
or something
though.
That's just really. So have I. Those are dark days. It's there's room for some optimism there, but I think as always with this team, it has to be cautious optimism.
Is there anyone on this team or anything about this team I haven't asked you that you think needs to be discussed ahead of the start of the season?
Man, not that I can think of. I feel like we've been pretty thorough on this one.
Look, if you have a Josh Okogie diatribe to go on, feel free. I'm all ears.
I think, Okogie, I just wonder what his role is on this team. And, he was a Tom Thibodeau draft pick. Now they're on to Sanjay Gupta. Yeah. So, how, tethered to him is he really going to be? It kind of makes me wonder that, he does good stuff, but, is that really, enough to keep him around there? Does he crack the rotation? Like him and Taurean Prince, I think, that's real competition for those Okogie minutes. And it's just got that much harder to see the floor on this team. I think, even with Patrick Beverley, but I also think Taurean Prince will push guys like Okogie on this roster.
Low key, if I was Jordan McLaughlin, I'd be kind of pissed about how the offseason unfolded. You have Leandro Palermo on here. They traded for Patrick Beverley, and now it just feels like he was someone who, even when he was hanging around on the free agency market, you were like, okay, maybe he could play. But now it's like, oh, he's probably not going to
play. Yeah, no, that's the frustrating. And he's shown stuff. It's not that he can't play. And I wonder if it's a situation like I remember when Nikola Pekovic was in his restricted free agency. And, the negotiations were dragging on. And teams really just kind of stayed away from him because they knew that, okay, he's probably going back to Minnesota no matter what. Like, it's not really worth tying up our cap space to move on this guy. And I wonder if it's kind of the same thing, even though, he's not a high dollar player, it's like, well, this isn't really worth our time, but maybe there could have been someone else out there who could have now offer him more than the Timberwolves likely will be able to. But, it's a long season. If, he has had to work his way up now and, someone get, unfortunately get injured at some point, there will be some opportunity. That's the thing that I think having guys like him and Noel who can absolutely play at any given moment, I think that's a sign of a good, healthy roster. Even if they're not, high level players, they can still contribute.
I guess if they're both in the rotation, that's probably a red flag for the health of the rest of the roster.
It was last season. Yeah, that was a problem. And they weren't up by 35 in the fourth.
Derek, this was fantastic as always. Are you able to tell our listeners where they can follow you on social media? Any work that you might have to plug it at this point?
Yeah, I don't really have any work to plug anymore, or at least at this point. See how that goes throughout the season. But right now, just Derek James NBA on Twitter. I'll have my thoughts during the season as we go, watching the games with the rest of them. Just not as a fan, but just, I guess, casual observer, I guess.
No, you're definitely more than a casual observer. I don't echo. You self-promote harder. Follow Derek on Twitter, people. If you haven't already, at Derek James NBA, spelled exactly as it sounds. Great follow, great insight onto the Timberwolves. He's tweets about the WNBA. He was always someone when he covered the WNBA that I would follow for insight as someone who just wasn't following that too intensely but wanted to keep up. So great follow. One last time, at Derek James NBA. Go ahead, follow him. This was great, Derek. I think you know by now. You've made 4 appearances because I have a doc that tracks it to make sure I don't bother people too often, and 3 look-ahead specific appearances. I think as you know by now, I will come calling in the future. So thank you for giving me so much of your time.
Awesome. Please do. Yeah, man. This is great.
What's going on, everyone? I'm Claudia Bellafato, and he is
Joe Fan.
This is Bet to Win. We talk betting. We break down the lines. We have the traders come on each week. We have some experts come on to talk boxing, UFC. We talk football. We talk basketball, baseball. What else do we talk about, Joe?
We make fun of each other.
We make fun of each other.
We have a whole lot of fun doing it.
We do.
So come join us. Let's pick some winners, lament the losers, have a good time doing it. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. New episodes out every Monday and Thursday.